Welcome to the Future of Work Live. Hosted by Mark Salisbury, author of the new book, Socrates Digital for Learning and Problem Solving. Each 25-minute episode with Mark and his guests prepares you for the upcoming new world of work.
Welcome to the Future of Work Live from the Metaverse. I'm Mark Salisbury, your host. Today, we are simulcasting on LinkedIn Live and Microsoft's AltspaceVR. Lee Winbush, our guest, will be talking about demystifying the metaverse. To join our audience in the metaverse, just create an AltspaceVR account at the address provided and log on, enter the code CMO845 and enter the Future of Work Live. And that's actually CMD 845. I misread that. And so let's go ahead and find out about our guest, Lee Winbush. So Lee is a curious technologist, experienced leader, and growth-oriented collaborator with over 25 years of experience across various industries, from consulting and banking to retail and manufacturing. And he's a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Lee obtained his undergraduate degree from Capella University and an MBA from the University of St. Thomas Opus College of Business. Lee is currently a senior technology and transformation manager for 3M's Consumer Business Group, where he serves the maker of Post-it notes and Scotch tape by developing technology strategies and roadmaps, as well as enabling digital commerce solutions and connected products. In addition, Lee serves the University of St. Thomas Opus College as an executive fellow and adjunct faculty advancing and teaching emerging technologies in business. So join with me in welcoming Lee Winbush to the show. And there he is. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, it's great to have you on. And I'm going to let our audience know we're simulcasting at the same time. So I'm going to change this a little bit, and I'm going to share our screen so we take a peek at the metaverse. And we'll do that here. We've got the window. Here it is. And we will share. And we will go here pleasantly right underneath. There we are. And that's our metaverse here for the day. And we can see us up on the stage. So there it is. Feels kind of funny, doesn't it?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in multiple places at once.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually take and then move this around a little bit. One of the things is that we're going to give people a chance and this is my character that's looking here. Let's go ahead here, and I'm going to move this camera space around and see that we got kind of an empty auditorium, Lee. I think that announcement about AltSpace being discontinued might have hurt our attendance today. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a very dynamic space, and it's interesting in emerging technologies how some things take center stage, right? And virtual reality and extended reality and the metaverse has really been center stage, I think, since Mark Zuckerberg renamed Facebook to Meta. But now this year, it seems to be the year of artificial intelligence and chat GPT and generative AI. So these things ebb and flow. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, very good. And let's start with our first question today is, I think a lot of people are kind of wondering, what are they looking at? So what actually is the metaverse?
So when I think about the metaverse, it's really this immersive new way that people can play, work, learn, and interact in a very immersive environment. So much like you and I are able to have a meeting in AltspaceVR. I just talked to a friend yesterday that he has a friend and his mother that watch movies together through their virtual reality headsets because they're not in the same physical location. So it really is this new immersive way that people can connect.
I don't know if you remember this, but a couple of years ago, they had those Oculus headsets that you could put on, and they had the two guys watching an NBA game next to each other. And I've got friends, as I'm sure you do too, around the country, and that's always planted a seed in the back of my head. I just didn't know how I would explain it to my wife.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's certainly interesting to be in a VR headset in the same room, but I think the real power comes from how do you bring people together from all over the country or maybe all over the world into one place? I think that's the real power of the metaverse.
Okay, well, here's a question I know a lot of people are thinking about is who are some of the dominant players in this area? I mean, we're on Altspace today, and we know that it's not going to be dominant. But what do you
Indeed.
see out there?
Yeah, so metaverse is we won't have a lot of time to unpack it today, but the real kind of foundations of the metaverse came through this new version of the internet that's coming called Web 3. And very quickly I would say that Web 2 is the internet we use today, the creator economy, the internet of information. And Web 3 really represents this new internet of assets, and it's surrounded by concepts like blockchain technology and Bitcoin and Ethereum and cryptocurrencies and things like that. And so you tend to find there are some players in the metaverse that are linked to that Web3 ethos. And they're not quite as dominant in terms of how they're used, but they're much in the media. Decentraland would be a good example, where there are different companies and personalities buying land in this virtual metaverse. JP Morgan has a presence in Decentraland called Onyx, for example. So that's kind of one big player that's out there. If you think about more of some of the Web3, the incumbents that are trying to stay relevant in the new internet, then you have Meta with their Horizon Worlds platform. And that's, again, it's a dominant player in terms of in the media, but not a lot of users, right? They've kind of disappointed in terms of the number of users. So if you think of other more players that have been around since before Metaverse was popular, think about things like Roblox, which is this immersive environment that oftentimes younger folks can go in and play different games, build different worlds, and participate in different things. And that has a much larger, user base. And concerts have taken place in Roblox, for example. Another that I would point to in a lot of ways is Minecraft. And again, that's been around for a very, very long time. Again, owned by another Web 2 incumbent owned by Microsoft. And I know I have 3 kids. My kids love spending time in Minecraft, hours and hours, right? So those are some of the big players that I would say from both the Web 3, kind of the new universe, as well as your Web 2 incumbents that are out there.
Okay. Well, let's switch from some of the people who are building the platforms to the people who are using it to advance their business. I know that you're quite involved with this at 3M. And so what is a very traditional company that like makes Post-it notes? How does this figure in with your business strategy to produce things and bring those to your customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. Mark, 3M makes a lot of products. We're most widely known, right, for our Post-it notes, our Scotch tape, our packaging tapes, command strips, those kinds of things. But that's actually only one of our 4 business units. And we have other business units that make really interesting products that maybe the users, consumers, we touch them, but we don't know they're 3M, right? So think about all of the films and things in your smartphone. Even in virtual reality hardware, we make quite a bit of films and products that go into those. And so we've been looking at leveraging the metaverse to bring our customers into an immersive environment and kind of explode out maybe the size, for example, of a product like a headset, and show them where 3M products could make a difference. Or we can show them examples of how our products might make their mobile phone more secure and better for users to work with. So things like that just wouldn't be very easy to do without maybe bringing somebody to one of our innovation centers around the world or to our lab. Think about during the pandemic, now we can send a VR headset to them and we can bring 3M to them, right, wherever they may be. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of how we use immersive technology, virtual reality, and metaverse.
Okay, that is interesting, and I actually live in the Twin City areas as well as you, and we all are very aware of all the things that 3M is into. But I think a lot of people don't realize what an enormous company it is and the influence it has in terms of its products and services and things like that. Let's go ahead and go into this other area here, this other question here that I think is just fascinating. And we're talking about the metaverse just being everything for everybody all the time, all of our personal lives. We don't even have to go to family reunions anymore. We can just do it in the metaverse and stay away from Uncle Fred, right? And so, how do you see this? Is this going to take over our lives, or is this just going to be a part of everything that we do?
So there's been a lot of hype, right? Especially since Facebook, renamed themselves Meta, as I mentioned earlier. And there is this sense sometimes in trends as you see them. Gartner, for example, talks about it with their hype cycle, where there's this initial massive peak, if you will, of inflated expectations for a technology. And eventually it falls off down into the trough of disillusionment. And that's precisely what's happening with Metaverse. So there's been all this talk that we're going to do our whole lives in the metaverse. And I don't see that. I really see the metaverse as being additive to what we do. So I'll give a couple of examples. One example that was actually, again, it's being called metaverse now, but it's something that's been around for a little while, a digital twin. So in an industrial context, sometimes we want to build maybe a large component, or imagine building a jet engine, like a General Electric jet engine, or other types of large industrial products where there's many subcomponents. Wouldn't it be fantastic to just bring your customer or bring engineers into that engine and actually see the components, see how they're all going to fit together in a virtual environment? So that's one way that's additive. No one's going to stop going to the plant and actually seeing the engine after it's been produced, but wouldn't it be great to have that digital twin where they can get in and see the product for itself? I think about the metaverse of learning. And so imagine the ability of being able to, maybe before we bring students to a college, can we give them exposure to our university and our culture through a metaverse environment, so they don't have to maybe travel across country. And maybe once they are a part of our university, maybe we could expand our capabilities to have people that aren't living in the area participate in a virtual environment. Or could we guide students through immersive learning experiences where maybe they could be given a task to do, or a plant to improve, if you're thinking about operations, for example, and imagine they can pull some levers in this virtual plant without breaking anything, without costing a lot of widgets to be wasted, but they can get a chance to change how the plant works, and then learn through that experience and be able to see the output in this immersive space. Again, that doesn't mean we're not going to have students come and do plant tours, right? It does not mean we're going to stop having students. In fact, I'm working in right now trying to arrange to bring some students to one of our innovation centers, right, later this year. So it doesn't mean that we would stop doing those things. What I see is that it's an additive thing that we can do. It's an additive tool in our toolbox to do things that would be maybe cost prohibitive or challenging in a physical environment.
Yeah. One of the things that I've found kind of fascinating is how it's going to change the way we work in our group dynamics, right? With how we're doing it. Because, we're since this pandemic, which I think has really moved up using these communication technologies like Zoom and stuff, has really accelerated that for not only work, but for education and a number of things. But one of the things is when I hear people talk about it, and some of our leaders of our very big companies that are very invested in this, it sounds kind of soft and warm and fuzzy, right? It's like, and we talk about presence and things like that. But when I start to look at it and think about it a little bit, what occurs to me is, we've all been to we've all been to some kind of a conference. And you're at this conference and you've been working on something for quite a while. And all of a sudden you go into a talk and you go, this is a different perspective than I have. You might actually give a talk yourself. What happens is all of this talk in the hallways, right? And so it's occurred to me, like, what if we actually could replicate some of that in a virtual space, and that virtual space doesn't go away? Conferences go away and it feels like you just learned a ton. And then you go back to wait for the next conference, right? And so I actually see that might be the promise of this, in the sense that all of those side conversations go on, and it creates a dynamic we can't with those other technologies. And so I put it to you, do you see the talk about immersive metaverses as actually being really very different than what we've experienced with Zoom and some of the other technology.
Yeah, fantastic question, Mark. I do think that we're going to see those kinds of capabilities. One platform I had a chance to experience is Simulacra, which is created by a company called REM5 based here in the Twin Cities. And they built a metaverse environment called One City, Two Realities. And it's, like you said, it's an environment that stays there and people can come into it and experience it. And it's this environment that talks about the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul and how great they are in terms of all these different dimensions. But one of the challenges is really around racial inclusivity, racial injustice. Certainly, folks remember the murder of George Floyd in 2020, and that unearthed, I think, a lot of things that maybe hadn't been brought to the surface and hadn't been public and thought about. And so they did a marvelous job of pulling in all kinds of different statistics about maybe how the Minneapolis-St. Paul experience is different for folks that don't come from Caucasian families, right? For Blacks and others that experience a very different city. And so they guide you through different facts and figures and videos, and it's all very as you're moving your avatar through this space. You have spatial audio, so you can choose to walk into a theater, for example, and watch a short audio clip. When you're done, you can walk away, and the audio kind of drops down. You can see videos and other speeches, perhaps, and different things. And it's all in this environment. You can bring multiple people into it and experience it together. Come and talk about it together, like you said, in the hallway, right? And say, how did seeing kind of the George Floyd Square impact me? How did I feel about that, right? I can now share that with a colleague, and then we might leave that space. And we might say, I want to look at that again because I want to write about it or something. And you can come back because the space is still there. So much like you said, how the conference, people come into the conference, they fly into Vegas or Florida or wherever they are. And then when they leave, the whole thing's torn down and another conference is put up. But in the metaverse, you could potentially go back to that space and reflect on it once again.
Yeah, kind of like that thing we used to call when we would write something down on a piece of paper. It's persistent data.
Exactly, exactly. So imagine a persistent environment now, right?
Yeah. Well, let's extend that out to, the working environment, because it strikes me too that it's not only learning about, diversity and how it impacts our lives and the opportunities we have to address it and use it, but also it strikes me as kind of the possibility of the metaverse as being kind of a great equalizer, right? I mean, we choose how we appear to people. It strikes me that it doesn't take a lot of imagination that you could have a work group and people would be not only from all over the world, but from different maybe economic stratas. You might have someone who's actually a mom in the Philippines who's basically part of your meeting, who is a finance expert. And it would be really hard to tell really anything about the ethnicity of that person or where they're physically located or any of those things. And so what do you think about that? Do you think this could be part of the great equalizer for us and part of our way that we start to think about people for their qualities and their abilities and skills rather than maybe some of the other things that we might have categorized them with before?
Yeah, that's really an interesting, perspective, and it'd be interesting to see how that unfolds. I think there's definitely the possibility, Mark. I think there is a possibility that it could become an equalizer. The avatar is really just there to be kind of embody us in this virtual environment. And so now we can turn our attention to being together and being able to collaborate together. Maybe being able to see that somebody's kind of fidgeting or they want to say something, but maybe they don't want to speak up, or maybe they want to kind of hold it closer to the vest. And a facilitator in the meeting can say, June, what do you think about that, right? And I want to hear your point of view, as well. And now you're more included. Whereas in maybe the more 2D kind of Zoom, Microsoft Teams, whatever product you're using, the more 2D meeting environment, much like we're in, here, in addition to the AltspaceVR that we're in. I can just turn off my camera, and then I might not be able to be involved at all, and no one might look at me and call upon me and leverage what I could contribute to the discussion. So I think you're right. I think it's possible. Now we'll see. Now, as I see people, in there, as I've played around in Horizon Worlds and things, sometimes people like myself, I've chosen an avatar that looks a lot like myself, right? I haven't chosen a purple octopus, necessarily. I've chosen one that kind of looks like me with brown skin and a flannel shirt, right? So we'll see.
Okay, well, very good. One of the things that really strikes me is, as I'm getting to the point in my career, all of the chances that I have passed up to meet, really people I've kind of admired. And I can remember, when I worked at the Boeing company, that we worked with Carnegie Mellon, and I was on, Carnegie Mellon's campus a number of times. And yet there's a couple of faculty members there that I would have loved to have, popped in and talked to them a little bit. And I think in a virtual world, that kind of thing actually becomes, more of a possibility for many of us than it might be in the actual physical world. So.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think even social media has opened that up to where, think about a platform like Twitter, which of course has been in the news for a variety of reasons, good and bad. But setting that aside, you now have access to people that you can just call upon anyone. You can tweet the president of the United States if you'd like, or people that you admire, look up to. I was just seeing a tweet. I think it was actually shared in LinkedIn, of an individual who reached out to a famous financier who happened to retweet one of his posts. And so he reached out to that individual and said, I'd love to buy you lunch and see if we could meet in New York. And sure enough, they set up a meeting. And it's this famous guy that's in the news. So I agree. I think the metaverse also opens up those possibilities where people who build a community around themselves now have a way to make themselves available to that community in ways that previously they just wouldn't have been possible. They're out in Beverly Hills or New York or wherever they are, and they're totally inaccessible to us as their follower or fan or maybe potential colleague. But now it's equalized through the metaverse, social media, etc.
Yeah. Well, as you know, our time goes zoom. So we're not on Zoom, but it feels like it because it goes by very quickly. And so that takes us to kind of our takeaway. And I know that people can find you on LinkedIn and on Twitter. So we put this up. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with today as some final thoughts about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I encourage my students, as I teach emerging technologies at St. Thomas. I've had the chance to talk to various people about topics like the metaverse, like extended reality, like these different emerging technologies that are coming to bear. I just encourage you to try it. Try to get in, to experiment with it. If you have the opportunity to get into some virtual reality glasses and get into some kind of an application or even a movie or other immersive experience, I would highly encourage it, because I think that the more people get into these environments, the more ideas will flow on, maybe there's immersive ways we could change teaching. Maybe there are ways, as you were saying earlier, Mark, that we can maybe break down, and make collaborations and working together more inclusive. But we need people to get that experience and then try it and then share it with others. So I just encourage you to experiment, try it out, and share it with others in your sphere of influence.
Oh, very good. And I'm taking a peek as your avatar can, and I'm looking out in the audience. I don't see anyone. So our great plan was that people would join us in the audience, and then they would come up to us and chat afterwards. And so apparently that didn't work out that well. We'll just blame that on the demise of AltSpace, and we won't think for a moment that people didn't want to talk to us.
Certainly not. Certainly not.
So I want to thank you, Lee, for being on the show today, and I will that'll be it, and I will just tell our audience, and I will just kind of amplify your message. Try this out and see what you think, and join us again next time on the Future of Work Live. And so, Lynn Winbush, thanks a lot for being our guest.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
You can find the Future of Work Live episodes in video and podcast format on www.marksalisbury.com. Additionally, YouTube hosts the video episodes on the Future of Work channel, and Apple, Spotify, and Google host the podcasts.